Well, I guess we can get started. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. We now have turned this into the R2J1 show, apparently, as we do our presentations. My name is Joe Grohman, and along with Ron Eades from Louisville and Ron Brown from Southeastern, we're here to entertain you until it's time to eat lunch. Well, you have to keep things in perspective. You try to kind of look for patterns as to where you fit in life. And when I looked at the schedule, I realized we're here purely for entertainment value. And moving from you're just having had a little snack and over to a full lunch that will be coming up. So that should certainly keep us entertained and hungry by the time we move out of here. And I do have to thank you all in Seattle here. I was doing the diligent thing the other evening before leaving for what turned out to be a 17-hour flight from Fort Lauderdale to Seattle. Peter, coming from the Netherlands, only took 5 more hours to get here than it took for us to get from Fort Lauderdale over here. And he had a much better flight than we did. But I looked at the weather forecast, and I saw that the highs were predicted for 72 and the lows for 52, and immediately froze because coming from Fort Lauderdale, I didn't expect to see winter again until January. And seeing 72 and 52 immediately froze in my tracks. But little did I know that Deb Quintel was in charge of weather and gravity, and the weather turned out perfectly as we would expect from her. And gravity's working well so far also. Thank you, Deb. We really do appreciate that. So she really set us up and is doing a wonderful job for us here. Our topic today, as you can tell, is why do our colleagues and we either use or not use these Cali lessons? We spend so much time putting them together. We spend so many sessions telling everybody why it would work well for them, why it works well for their students, what's going on when we have a group of people simply not using it. And so we're going to address that this morning, and whether we come up with some results that make sense to you, I don't know, because I keep looking at these and I still wonder myself. The way we'll organize this morning is I'm going to do the general introduction. My essential job is to go through the survey results and bore you, and then leave Ron Eades and Ron Brown to clean things up for me. And the information that we're using, by the way, comes from a variety of sources, so that we will not be accused of simply having a very limited survey. One source, One source, if you will recall, is the American Bar Association did a survey a little over a year ago of the law professors' use of technology. So that's one of the surveys at which we looked. And then also Cali went ahead and did a survey of the usage of the Cali materials. And not wanting to be accused of being too limited in our research, we went to great lengths to do completely verifiable and statistically, easy for you to say, statistically verifiable surveys. So we went to Louisville and conducted a survey. And not wanting to be outdone and trying to branch out, become an international survey, we went to Florida. And we also surveyed at Southeastern University, asking our colleagues a variety of questions. Speaking of surveys, by the way, for those of you who are authors, there is a survey that's going around. And if you'll take the time to fill that out and return it over here to Barbara, please, we'd greatly appreciate that. And don't do it during my time. Do it during Ron and Ron's time. All right. So in any event, we wanted to get some feedback and to take a look at what really is going out there in the usage factor. So with all this information, we had to categorize it in some useful manner. I wasn't able to do that, so this is the best that we can come up with. The first question that was asked on the surveys, are you at all aware, in other words, are you awake today, that Cali offers free interactive lessons? And sure enough, 94.9% of the population, actually those who actually answered, said, sure, we know that they do that. And that's the Cali survey. If you go to the ABA survey, even better results. 95.2%, probably not statistically different or significant to us, but still better. If we go to Louisville, where we have a very active Cali author and CEB member, we get results at 91.7, saying yes. Go to Southeastern, where you have multiple CEB members, multiple authors, we drop down to 80%. Now, I'm not sure that that says much about Ron and the other people, on me, I have to include myself, on the faculty and those of us who are involved, but we're looking for patterns here. And going to these other schools and doing the larger surveys, they're far more aware than the schools at which we work. So that leaves us with some question in mind as to how effective we really are in doing all of this. But anyway, we went on, not being satisfied with the fact that they were aware. We now wanted to know from them the usage factor. And wanting to make it a statistically verifiable survey, we put them on the range, the sliding scale of 1 being never using it, or perhaps dropping it on my toe, moving it across the other side of my office, and 5, I use it often, or I take it out for drinks on Friday night. With that question, we got a response. No usage, ABA survey, 54%. Although there's 90-some percent that's aware, ABA, 54%, no usage. Louisville, 91.7 of those who responded. Nova, half the group. 80% said they're aware, half the group not using it, or larger, more than half the group. Interesting questions. We're going to show, this was a general question for usage, and what we did is there were different ways that they could answer. We're going to break it down more specifically in a couple of minutes, but when you look at the survey later on one of our slides, oh, I'm sorry, this is a PowerPoint, I can't call it a slide, on one other section of the PowerPoint presentation, we'll ask some specifics about what have you done as far as usage is concerned. This was simply not using it. Done. And that's why this jumped out. I thought that these were just, very surprising figures for me to see that. So you have to ask the logical question, why not? And by the way, when we did the surveys at our respective schools, we only had a little over 1/3 of our faculty respond to the survey. I mean, that's one of the things that really surprised me, that we were working in the 30% range just on how many of our faculty members were even responding to the questions, responding to the survey. And we're active. And so you have to question what's going on out there. Why are they ignoring us other than just our personalities? So we have to ask this. Excuse me. We have to ask, why not? Well, one of the answers that one might expect, there's no coverage in the Cali lessons. Okay, that's 20% of the group that responded saying that. Another 20%, I'm not even familiar with them. I know they're there, but I don't know what's there. I don't know. It seems kind of different from what I would have expected of an active faculty group. One would hope that they'd be there for the benefit of their students, and if there were other materials available that could help them, they would take the time to find out. But 20%, not even familiar. Then comes the next question, or the next response. Checking it out is too much trouble for me. I like that response. At least it's honest. I would couch it in other terms, but being ordered to be politically correct these days, I won't put it in the terms that I think about. But 16.5%, too much trouble for me to go find out. So I'm not going to do it. And you can't make me. In the ABA survey, the same response had gotten 11.8% response. I don't agree with the content. Interesting subject. Ron and I think it was last year, did a presentation just on that topic and how you can handle lessons where you don't agree with the subject matter coverage. But nevertheless, almost 9% still say not going to do it. The ABA survey, almost 12%, that they just don't agree with the content, so we're not going to do it. Or why not? I could not monitor the students' progress. Now, that one surprised me. I can't figure out a lot of reasons why you want to monitor their progress, unless, of course, you're like me. Now, what I do, because I'm a controller and a manipulator, i.e. I'm a lawyer, I assign the lessons. It's part of what they have to do as their requirement in class. Plus, I even give them a bump up, extra credit, for their grade. If they do all the lessons and they get 85% correct throughout all the lessons, every lesson has to be 85 or better, they get an extra credit towards their final grade for that. So I could see why I want to monitor, and the way I monitor is I have them print out the certificate that Cali presents, and they deliver that, and we go through and check it off and make sure that they're They're scoring the way that they're supposed to. But in general, I don't know why you would want to monitor that. But apparently that 9%, or roughly 9%, figured that they wouldn't do it because they couldn't monitor. I found the students were not helped by the lessons. Now, that part surprises me, that that's even a major response. Because I don't know how you tell that. I don't know how you're able to tell whether the problem is the lessons or what the students are doing with them. I'm currently finding some troubles with my extra credit section, or my extra credit portion of the class, because they've learned that they can get back into the lessons and redo them and get a different certificate, and they're not learning. What they're doing is they remember the last answer was a wrong answer, so I'm going to choose one of the others, and they keep doing that until they get it correct. And so they've lost the learning. I have to do something else because I want to give them the extra credit and the additional incentive to go ahead and use the lessons. But to say that they're not helped is kind of interesting, and relate it to the lessons themselves as to why they're not learning. Of course, it couldn't be anything we're doing in class. In the ABA survey, we got an even higher response to that. Almost 11% gave the similar response. The students are too busy, so we're not going to assign these lessons to them. Well, I understand that Sex and the City is on reruns now, so they didn't have to watch the live show, or not the live show, but the original presentation of it. They could now get it on rerun. What else they're busy with, I could not imagine. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the IMing that they go through. We had one student chastise the faculty now that she graduated because we have a laptop policy in our law center. We want them to have their laptops in class. We want them to be using them, although some misuse them. Gee, it's a surprise. Law students might misuse something. So they misuse the laptops, and they IM either each other or their friends. And she chastised us, saying that she found that to be very distracting. I thought as she was doing that she was saying that she was being distracted by other screens, and my comment was going to be, well, don't look at those screens. No, her comment was she was being distracted because she had 56 buddies on her IM list, and they were emailing her and IMing her while she was in class. And, of course, she was responding while she was in class. It didn't dawn on her. I had to change the answer, of course, turn off the IM. But nevertheless, they are busy, apparently, doing some things out there. For those who are using it, now, to what degree? We ask those questions also. As to those who are actually using the Cali lessons, 1, again, being I drop it on my toe, 5, I take it out for a drink on Friday. How do you use them? Well, suggest to the students that they use them as secondary sources was one of the possibilities. That's all, just suggest it. Well, that apparently was far more difficult because on a scale of 1 to 5, we came out with a 2. On that. And to show you again how effective we are, at Louisville, we got a 1.3 out of 5. Now, because Ron and I team up together, we did far better. We got a 1.5 out of 5. Okay? So apparently the teamwork helps. So if you have any questions about your law school, make sure you have another author and CEB member around, and you'll get far better results than when poor Ron has to work by himself at Louisville with that. Other opportunities for the manner of use. Recommend them, not the suggestion. Now it's a recommendation, a little more of a push on that. In the Cali response, we got a 50.6 out of that. And we have been told that by doing these at these sessions, we are preaching to the choir, and perhaps that's indicated as true because in the ABA survey, there was only 25% who would actually go to recommend them, even though 90% of the population knew about these lessons being available. Include them in your syllabus. Now, I can see why that might cause some difficulty. We only get 31.6% out of that, because there you actually have to pay attention to what's in the syllabus and then look at a lesson and see that it ties in with whatever it is that you want to be doing at that particular time. And there are some judgments to be made regarding that. One of the interesting things that I found, not only in authoring but also in using the Cali lessons, is it really has made me stop to think about what I do. I mean, I actually have to pay attention now. So it changed my life. And I have to see what presumptions I have going in there and whether these lessons alter those presumptions, reinforce those presumptions. But it does make me stop to think about where I will put something in the syllabus or whether I'll put it there at all. So I could see that. What I found interesting is the response to I mentioned them. In the ABA survey, we can only get 15% of the people to mention them. 15% of those who would respond to even mention it. Assign the lessons, again on the 1 to 5 scale, we were able to get a 2.1 on degree of usage for assigning them. And we didn't put a limit on there. We didn't say assign them often or whatever. They just simply would respond as to their degree of actually assigning them. So on degree of usage, we got a 2 out of 5 on that one. Assigning them as homework, 24% of those responding to the Cali survey said that they would assign them as homework. Whereas in the ABA survey, 10.5. Interesting conflicts in all of this. Don't know what they mean, but I think that we have to be addressing these issues, because if we believe that these really do benefit the students, we have to get them to the students somehow. Require the students to complete them as a course requirement. Almost 18% of those responding would go ahead and do that. So I thought that that was interesting. So what we find out then from all of this is we have this great diversity regarding the use and non-usage of the lessons. And we need to address that, which sets us up then for our next 2 colleagues to come forward and explain how we can how we can encourage the other faculty members to go ahead and do this.
Right. Right. The other left. I'm Ron Eades, and as he's already noted, we did this survey, and in fact, I think one of these screens in just a moment actually will show you what the survey looked like. And one thing I'm going to mention a time or two, if at the end of my comments, if you are interested, you can send me an email, and I will send you our little survey form by an email attachment. And if you'd like to print it out or change it on your computer any way you want to and use it in your law school just to get an idea, I'll be glad to do that. I'll be sure and give you my email address at some point before I sit down. But we did this survey as a way of trying to figure out, are people really using these things? And our sense was that they weren't using them as much as we personally thought we were. But then also to try to figure out why. So what we did is we ran this survey, we tabulated these results, and our goal was to try to come up with some ideas or at least talk about. This is what the survey looked like. This is what sort of generated it. We had some things we thought about when we were putting together. One, we wanted it on one sheet of paper. That was almost the overriding thought about the survey at all. Because I've discovered when I get handed survey forms in my mailbox at school, if it's over one sheet, I don't answer them. I sort my mail in the mail room at the University of Louisville because there is a garbage can there, and I find that if I carry my mail back to my office, it lays on my desk. But if I sort it in the mail room, the garbage never makes it to my desk. So a 2-page survey form never makes it to my office because it goes, so primary feature was 1 page. As I said, I have this on my drive at school. If you'd like a copy, I have no pride of authorship in it. I'll be glad to email you a copy by an attachment. I created it on Microsoft Word. You could make little changes and use it. My email address is also fairly easy. It's ron.eades@louisville.edu. So that's pretty easy to remember. So we put this together. One of the things that I thought about after I started getting responses back at Louisville is I came to realize, and this is a thought that I kind of had that I think dictates what I've got to say, is this survey, at least this survey, and I'm beginning to think all surveys, are not a reflection of reality. Surveys aren't reality. But this survey is a measure of people's perception of reality. And the reason I say that is there some of these numbers he gave you and some thoughts I had lead me to believe that it's not exactly what people were thinking. Some of the comments that he's already identified, I sort of reduced, and I've given you 2 lists up here. One is how faculty members see that they personally don't want to use Cali lessons, and the other list is what these faculty members who responded to the survey saw as problems for the students if they use these Cali lessons. And I've given you these lists where I've tried to kind of break it down, but basically I think there were sort of 4 items in the middle of this survey that we seem to get complaints about that gave us very low usage of Cali lessons. Some faculty members thought that the technology was just too hard. The technology was difficult, hard to get into. hard to work with the technology. Some commented that they thought that the material was just too difficult and too much trouble for them to get into. They didn't want to have to read through the lessons, that sort of thing. Some had talked about or mentioned that they didn't want to be dictating to students. They didn't want to be directing the students. Students were too busy. They didn't want to be telling the students what secondary materials to use. And then some just said there were, errors in the lessons. The lessons were wrong. Well, I thought about that, and it gave me some interesting ideas. And sort of as a parallel, I teach torts, so my comments and examples are tort comments. And there are secondary materials that I think I recommend, and I would be surprised if most faculty members who teach torts didn't at some point. And those are obviously the traditional Horn book by Prosser on torts and the newer Horn book by Dobbs on torts. Those big, thick green books. At some point, if you're teaching a first-year torts class, surely almost every torts teacher has said, if all else fails, get a copy of one of those and try to read what a battery is. I think it'll become clear after some reading. So we do some of that. And thinking about that, I began to think, okay, now that's pretty easy technology, but it is technology. I mean, you have to understand books, how to open them, index, table of contents. So there is technology even involved with that. But I got to thinking, well, one of the first was we do recommend outside readings. We do talk about things that require some technology. They have to go to the library, they have to get the book, they have to learn how to use it. And I'm not certain that every faculty member who ever recommended Prosser or Dobbs on torts agreed with every word in it. I'm sure every one of us that have taught torts have found a few mistakes that the great learned Prosser and Dobbs have made along the way. So I'm not real certain that these explanations that we're getting for why they're not using Cali lessons are really valid. And that's the reason I said that this survey, I think, is not reality, but it is a perception of reality that these people have. So I kind of began to think about some of these. The technology is too hard. I mentioned that's one of the things. The technology is too difficult. Not anymore. If the technology was once too difficult to use, a Cali lesson is not anymore. I can't remember which. Yes. Absolutely. Well, and I think that's the funny thing about this. The survey gave us these responses, and I don't think that's what the professor. I don't think that's reality. But I think that's what the professor feels like. It's either too hard for them or too hard for the students. The amazing thing to me, and I should have noted the year. I wish I had sort of had a little plaque made. I went through several years where I would occasionally see one laptop in the classroom, sometimes two. And then suddenly a few years ago I walked in, first day of class, and it was filled. It really struck me as odd. It didn't progress, one laptop at a time with me staring at the back of it. It went from 2 or 3 in the classroom one May to the room filled that August. They all use laptops. They use them for everything. They use them for their notes. The irritant is when they come to my office after class and they want to ask me a question, they have to get their laptop out to ask me a question. So they sit down, and the really irritant, the ones, they plug in their little converter and they stand there holding their plug. I now have a power strip plugged in with the power strip sets right on the other side of my desk. I got tired of them crawling under my desk, under my table. You're looking over the desk and there's this. So I've got the university to give me a little power strip. They bring it all up, the little music, they type up, and then they ask me, what was the second element of a battery? They type it in, they close it, and so they are using the technology. It's not a problem. And so I think if we're talking about secondary sources, they are finding secondary sources. They are finding secondary sources that are technology related. They use technology for everything. And one of the beauties of the Cali lesson, I think, is that people learn in 3 different ways. There are 3, just basic sort of educational psychology is you either learn visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically, by movement. basically, Cali lessons involve at least two of those, visual and movement, kinesthetic. The interactive gives you some movement. It would be much better if you had a good textile response on the, so if you could carpet your, so you could get sort of the feel of something a little rough, it would be much, yeah. My wife teaches learning disability children, so I've learned some of this by working with her. Cali actually is using some auditory messages in Cali lessons. We're working on that. At least one of my Cali torch lessons has a reading that I did out of Brandeis's Right of Privacy article, and I think it's really wonderful to hear Brandeis read with a Southern accent. It's kind of adds, and I think it's meaningful to students in Kentucky to hear that. I mean, it gives them those concepts in a tone and a cadence they can follow. But the Cali lesson gives you in all of them the visual learning, the movement, the response. They're moving to sound. So we're using technology to really key into those learning factors. So the technology is not too hard. People are using these things for everything. So I don't think that's the difficult part. Another one that I mentioned was it's very difficult for faculty members to get into the substance of them, and Joe mentioned that as one of their complaints. They're not reading them. And it is difficult. I have written some Cali lessons. I'm on the editorial board, so I've read through to edit and review some of them, and to really read one closely so that you follow all of the correct responses and you follow all the incorrect responses and you follow all the looping back and you read every response. It can take hours to go through one very closely. And I can understand as publishing companies want to bring out new editions of the casebook you're using and new editions of the Horn book, and you're going to be recommending these things and you're reading law review articles. At some point, as faculty members, and you've got your own research and writing to do, at some point you start saying, I just don't have time to read that. I've got some textbooks I use. I got some things I recommend. I don't want to go then and spend, all summer reviewing Cali lessons to see if and that is a problem. There are some things that I think you can take back to your colleagues. There are some short summaries of the lessons. Cali is working on sort of teacher's manuals for the lessons to give kind of support and help in that way. I think this really is one of the difficult issues, is a way to get people started so that they feel comfortable enough that they can assign. Another comment I made is don't want to dictate to students what to use. That I really thought was an odd one. As I mentioned already, I can't imagine a faculty member not making a recommendation of something. I mean, I would think most of us at least have a required text. Well, that's some way in dictating. I can't imagine anyone going into a torts class and saying, learn torts, use any materials you want to use, and I'll come and talk about torts. So we do. I mean, we mention law review articles, or we might recommend Prosser or Dobbs. In the middle of a class, you might, there are a couple of statutes in torts. There have been a few evil codifiers in the world who have tried to codify a few tort principles. So occasionally, you'll mention a statute. Go read this statute. So we are recommending secondary sources. And the idea that we don't want to recommend or dictate to students what to use, I think, is really not the real reason. In fact, one of the things that I frequently think about is students are using a lot of secondary sources that I try to recommend against. I think there are a lot of secondary sources that are not helpful to them. A couple of us were even talking over the dinner cruise about one of the worst forms that we see, and I was really pleased to see that it's everywhere else too, is there is always that legendary outline that the mythical student several years ago wrote that got an A in the course. And no one can quite remember the student or who they were or anything, but it is this outline that lives forever. And our student government, does a booming business. They have the legendary outline for each course that they photocopy and then sell to all the other students, and that becomes the text that they all want to use. That's the secondary source they're using. I would much rather encourage secondary sources that I have some faith in. And so this idea that we don't dictate to secondary sources, and that was some of the responses. I don't think that's a reality either. We do recommend and dictate secondary sources. We tell them what to read. We do it all the time. I have students come to me sometimes and say, well, I've read this and I read that. Do you have another secondary source I can read because I want to do some more reading? Surely that happens to other faculty members. I can't believe there are faculty members out here there that say, no, I refuse to recommend anything else for you to read. I mean, the few times I think it's happened 3 times in 27 years where a student came to me and asked for something else. I mean, I was so pleased that someone actually was showing some initiative. I gave them a whole reading list of things that they might find interesting. But so I'm not certain that's the real reason. That may be the perception. There is then that idea that some of the lessons are wrong. There are mistakes. And that's another, to start off with, as I said, I think any of us who have taught torts and have recommended Prosser or Dobbs have found a few places, and even occasionally in class, we might say, if you're reading Prosser, we're not in total agreement on this point. It happens. The Cali lessons are written by people who are experienced law teachers in that area. I was on the torts fellowship. The torts team sort of had as our motto 100 years of experience teaching torts. There were 5 of us. I had been teaching like for a year or 2, and then there were 4 of these old guys that had been around for a long time. And I was there to bring a little energy to the group. And that's the kind of people that are writing these Cali lessons. I mean, people who have been doing this a long time. Then they are reviewed by Deb Quintel at Cali and some of the Cali people. Very knowledgeable people, been working at Cali for some time, very knowledgeable about the lessons, read a lot of lessons. Then they are sent to a member of the Cali editorial board, another experienced law teacher who will pick it apart with a fine-tooth comb and will delight in being critical. Having been an author, some of them delight a little too much in being critical, but that's all right. So they're really picked apart to watch for things like accuracy. And then what is amazing, once they are published, there is a comment process that is available. Students can comment. Faculty members can comment. The comment goes into Deb Quintel. She'll send it back out to the author, and any mistakes or errors are again reviewed. It is one of the few available secondary materials that is written, edited, and constantly available for comment. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't errors in it. I mean, nothing in the world is perfect. I'm more than willing to agree with that. But this is really reviewed on a constant basis. And as one who has written lessons, I've been there, done that. I've gotten the comments back, have to go back, look back through a lesson, read through it, try to figure out what was I thinking when I said that, and try to make adjustments. So the idea that there are errors, it could be, but it is one of those secondary materials that really is available for that kind of review. So I'm not really certain that is the real reason either. When I got to thinking about this, I think there is a kind of a hidden reason, a hidden agenda. And that hidden reason is this. Professors have not been using Cali lessons in the past, so they're not using them now. It's really that simple. And it's not me just saying one of those things, well, you know how it is. Old people don't use computers, and so these old faculty members don't use computer lessons. I do know at times it is a common statement among some of our younger colleagues that, those old gray-haired people, they sit around, they won't change, and that sort of thing. I don't really think that's true. To start off with, just a couple of... My 80-year-old mother uses email and surfs the web. Now, for those of you who are starting to age, part of that is because you cannot get reasonably priced medication anymore unless you surf the web. So we are rapidly creating one of the most internet-savvy group of older Americans that this world has ever seen. My wife's father is 93 years old, and he uses email. Now, he's not quite into web surfing, but he does use email. The second oldest faculty member at the University of Louisville is one of the faculty members who requires Cali lessons in his class. He teaches evidence, and he thinks that interplay, that interactiveness of the Cali lesson is just peculiarly suited to a class in evidence. For students who aren't familiar with the courtroom setting, it gives them a little bit of a sense of question and answer, interactive. And as I said, he's the second oldest faculty member in the building. It reminds me of that old saying, age isn't important unless you're wine or cheese. I mean, age has really got nothing to do with it. The reason faculty members don't use Cali lessons, I think, is that the legal profession is a very conservative profession, and I don't mean that politically. I mean that really in the true sense of the word. It resists change. Faculty members were law students once, and they didn't use Cali lessons, and they were successful. So now when they teach like a faculty member that they had as a student taught, and since they didn't use Cali lessons, they don't use Cali lessons. If it worked so well for me, why should I change it? If it's ain't broke, don't fix it sort of mentality. I also thought a little further. Faculty members want to teach exactly like they were taught. It's just part of what we are and what we do. Another problem with that is there is no incentive financially to change. If you think about each of your own institutions, and I've talked to others, we're basically go through the promotion and tenure process and then the annual review process based upon some things that might look like student reviews of our classes. How many law review articles did you turn out? Did your law review article make it into one of those 50 law journals that's in the top 25 law journals in the nation? Not listening, Joe. Anyway, those are the kinds of things that we receive financial incentives for right now. There is very little financial incentive these days to really move in and to begin to change the way people are teaching, even to the small extent of recommending sort of different kinds of secondary sources and that sort of thing. We are seeing a little bit. I do know, and I've mentioned to others, that the current dean at the University of Louisville is now wanting people to put in their sort of annual reports whether they are using technology in the classroom and what sort of technological things they're doing. So we're seeing little bits of that. But the idea of there being a real financial, and we are a financially motivated society, might as well admit that. So that's another sort of lagging process. So the real reason I think we aren't using Cali lessons is that we don't, and that's really it. Now, in a sense, and Joe's already said this, we're sort of preaching to the choir here. This group, the people who come to the Cali conference, are sort of the cross between the techies and the teachers. We are people who have realized that the computer is not some sort of evil device, but it's not also the be-all and end-all of the world. It is merely another tool. It's a tool in the same way that a ballpoint pen, a piece of chalk, and an eraser is a tool. We try it. When it works, we use it. If it doesn't work for something, we leave it at home. I mean, it has a use. So we're that group of people. What that group of people is going to do is more and more people are entering that group. As I said, there was that fall several years ago, I walked into class, and suddenly every student had a laptop. I think that same thing will happen in law teaching. I mean, at some point, it just becomes so secondary, such a part of people's lives that they will use it. This group is the group that is already, the people attending Cali conferences and our Cali authors are already using the lessons. And there's really no big thing to overcome. You're not going to convince them that the lessons don't have mistakes or the lessons are not hard to get into. Instead, it's just it has to become a part of the teaching process. So sort of my recommendations is if you haven't written a lesson or two, write one or two. And then talk about your experience of doing that with your colleagues. If you're not currently using them, use them in your class. Recommend them, suggest them, get student comments back yourself, and talk about that with your colleagues. I think one of the things to do, if you're already using Cali lessons in some way, either suggesting, recommending, or requiring, is send me an email and ask for a copy of that survey. Change it if you like, whatever you want to do. Pass it around to your colleagues. Doesn't matter what response you get. It creates dialogue. It's a way for you to approach your colleagues, if nothing else, the question about, are you aware that there are free Cali lessons? Some of them might come to you and say, I wasn't aware of that. And it creates a dialogue. It's almost as if I reached the point once I started looking at the numbers don't matter. The process itself generates the dialogue to begin this sort of conversation. And I think if you did that, that would be a way for you to sort of begin the dialogue in your own law school. I mean, I hope this survey, I didn't have the help of Ron Brown to help me, elevate the use from 1.3 to 1.5 like Joe did, but I'm hoping that the use of the survey will at least allow me this fall now to kind of continue the conversation with the faculty that's actually doing it. Students stare at their computers all day now. It really is an interesting phenomenon. They spend their whole day staring at it, and they're not IMing their buddies or playing solitaire or doing their checkbook or whatever they do. I think by having access to the Cali lessons, I'm trying to use that as a way to. They don't have an excuse anymore that I don't have time to go to the library. They've got the interactive lessons with them. So I think that's the approach that I'm going to use, and this survey has also helped me kind of come up with ways to move that forward with my colleagues. Yes, ma'am. No, this is the first time we've done it. Kind of put this together. We had heard. She asked me. I'm sorry, since we're doing this live, and I discovered at the plenary session this morning there's a real movement to record every moment of our lives. Anyway, it was a very interesting session. We did it once. There had been a survey by the ABA. There's some other surveys out there. We got those together. We wrote up this survey ourselves, kind of passed it among ourselves and did it, and then used it at each of our schools, and then sort of funneled all of the information into Joe so he could put the numbers together. And we were sort of amazed that our results kind of tracked the other results. They're all very similar. The numbers come out about the same. It might be an interesting thing to do, I wouldn't say every year, but wait 3 or 4 years after we've talked a little bit in each of our schools and see if we see a change. The question was what time of year we did it, and I was trying to remember, did we do it near the end of the spring semester? So they had sort of, school was still in session, but they had all year to kind of think about it and do it. I don't really think the numbers would have changed dramatically by the time of year. The only number, I mean, if we'd done it in the summer, the response to the survey itself would have been less just because nobody's there. But I think by doing it any time during the normal school year, or any other, yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, his question is basically, why do we care what faculty think if students are using them? Maybe our marketing ought to be to students. And I haven't seen the numbers recently. I've heard Deb Quintel give me the numbers several times on the number of hits they get at the website from students and that sort of thing. And those numbers are increasing at fairly high rates. I think it's the sort of thing that, again, the sort of the ironic thing about this is our faculty colleagues may be well behind the curve on this at some point, and maybe we could look at it as a way to help our colleagues to keep up with their students. But I do think, for me, it's watching my colleagues be concerned about students using secondary materials they don't like, that old student outline, the commercially prepared outlines. And my view is trying to help my colleagues see that there is a very good secondary source that the students will like, and that's one they ought to be using. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let Ron.
Not that what I think is so that I'm going to say is so earth-shattering, but since I've come so far, might as well get in a few minutes. And let me tell you, my senior colleagues have presented the hard science, and what I'm going to give you is something a little bit more impressionistic and drawn from the inspiration of the theme of this conference, which is there and back again. And I thought it was particularly appropriate because during the last semester, my son was in a play. He's in the 5th grade, and he was in a play presented by the Regional Theater for Children in Fort Lauderdale, and the play was The Hobbit, There and Back Again. And because he's in 5th grade and doesn't drive, I had to drive him to rehearsals. And so I got to sit through lots of rehearsals because I would bring work rather than drive home. And so I started to get the impact, and I think maybe I caught on to why it's such a good theme for this conference. For those of you who don't remember, I'm sure most of you do, the story of The Hobbit is the prequel to The Lord of the Rings, which everybody is now familiar with from the movies if they don't remember the books. And in The Hobbit, Bilbo, who is a hobbit, and hobbits, as you recall, are small humanoids, smaller than humans, smaller than dwarves. The main physical characteristic is the hair on their toes, and the main psychological characteristic is that hobbits are creatures of habit. They like their routines, they like their comforts. To a hobbit, the day starts with breakfast, shortly after their second breakfast. Then there's early lunch, late lunch, early dinner, snack, and then the visit to the pub. That is the life of a hobbit, and hobbits stay in their routine. They don't go far from their dwellings. They stay in this routine and enjoy the comforts of their sedentary lives. Now, one day there's a knock on Bilbo's door, and Bilbo sees a wizard, and a wizard who has trailing behind him 13 dwarfs. One of the dwarves was my son, but that's another story. We have the dwarves. We have Gandalf, the wizard, who says, Bilbo, we're here to go on an adventure, and we're here to recruit you. Come on an adventure with us. Dwarves are here to do the work. And after a number of rehearsals, then the play was presented, and since my son was in it, I saw it 6 times. And about the 4th time through The Hobbit, when Gandalf knocked on the door, I realized that he looked familiar. And as I looked closer, I realized that he resembled John Mayer. John the Wizard. And behind him, leading the dwarves, Thorin, the leader of the dwarves. Thorin looked like Deb. And John, the Wizard, and Deb were saying, come away with us on this adventure. And Bilbo said, hobbits don't like adventures. Thank you very much, goodbye, and slammed the door. Gandalf was not to be denied. He knocked again, and pretty soon, Gandalf had convinced the hobbit to go on an adventure. I started suddenly realizing that that wasn't Bilbo up there. It wasn't Bilbo, it was me. And John was saying, come away with us on an adventure. Leave the comfortable law school, traditional law school world behind. Come away with us. We're searching for treasure. We're going to unlock the mystery of the law for our students. The Hobbit, I asked, are there going to be any obstacles? Nothing significant, said Gandalf Mayer. I'll help you, said Thorin Oakenshield, Deb Quintel. We're right behind you, shouted the dwarves, who suddenly looked like the board of editors. We're right behind you with a sheath of critiques. A minute. Extra work. Depart from the safe routines of my controlled life. Chance of success. What was I waiting for? Of course I went on this adventure. But I decided I would be a little crafty. Try to minimize the obstacles, because rather than assign it, I would use an extra credit project. And it would be easy. I would assign certain lessons, say, here's the minimum score. And you know, when you get to the end, the machine goes beep and prints out a certificate. All I have to do is collect the certificates. I'll give them to my secretary. He'll just count them up. And if they've done enough, they get credit. And if they haven't done enough, they get credit. I have figured this out. I have overcome the obstacles. I feel like the successful burglar Bilbo. I have found my way around it. Felt like a hero, like a genius. Then I went to the office and turned on my email. Dear Professor Brown, I've just completed Cali Lesson X. It's all going to be Lesson X to protect the innocent. I've just completed Lesson X. For some reason, the Internet Explorer completion certificate window will not allow me to change the name field to my own. I have drafted and sent a duplicate email to Bill Gates at Microsoft, but received no response. I swear this is a real email. This is the... Received no response. Is there any possibility that you could just sign off on this in order for me to complete my assignment? A dragon? I've got a student sending flamers to Bill Gates. Dear Professor Brown, I am in the middle of Lesson X, and it will not move to the next question. I have answered 6 out of 6, and I'm up to question 3A. Is there a flaw in this program? Please let me know how to proceed. Proceed? I'm going to send this to Deb. Dear Professor Brown, the link to question 10 in the Cali Exercise X is not working. It says the following: object not found. The requested URL is not found on the server. Error 404. I've tried it several times, and it always says the same thing. I'm not sure if my Cali exercises should be considered incomplete. Should I skip this question? Please let me know. Dear Professor Brown, I do my Cali lessons from the CD and have run into a problem. When I hit a question that maybe is the correct answer, it counts as a wrong answer. As a result, I am not able to score higher than 72%. The problem? I will try the web version. Thank you. Dear Professor Brown, when I did Lesson X, the answer to question 6 is different than what you said in class. Please tell me which is right. Now, I'm reading these emails when I could be eating second breakfast. And if you doubt that we're hobbits, I know at least me, I had a nice breakfast at the hotel, and I came up here and found the spread and went, second breakfast! Yes! Yes, John knows his hobbits. Second breakfast. These emails, this is not what a hobbit wants. Now, the reality is, all these problems were pretty easily solved. Most of them I sent to Deb. Some of them I deleted, just pretended they weren't there. Very hobbit-like. But they were not overwhelming. But for a hobbit, a creature of comfort, a creature of routine, taking on something doesn't need. It's going on an adventure. And so when colleagues said, now, were all those aggravations, because of course when I got an email I had to tell somebody, and Joe would only listen so many times, was all that aggravation worth it? Did they turn out better? I don't know. I don't have any hard evidence. It's all impressionistic. I think the students liked it. I think they got something back out of it. I think they got some benefits. But can I present hard evidence to convince other people that that's right? I don't have that. Now, the other thing is, when we look at all this, there are so many easy justifications for these hobbits to stay home. Even with a wizard trying to convince the hobbits to come, most of them are going to stay comfortably in their holes. And I know the impulse. Hobbits are hobbits. As I think was pointed out, we're the adventurous ones. We're the oddball ones. We're the different ones. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But for most, the focus, that routine, doing what's traditionally done, we're hobbits by nature, and getting us out of that routine is very difficult. And I think my conclusion was brought up quite adeptly by our colleague here, which is, I think the point is, learn from a Hobbit, there and back again, is that hobbits are hobbits. And we're not going to change hobbits. John will find, and Deb will find, the occasional oddball one who's willing to go on an adventure. But the numbers, as we've seen, are very small. Even people willing to answer a survey are small. So I think that what we ought to do is acknowledge that. Hobbits are hobbits. But the students are out there on an adventure. They're trying to cross the dismal swamp of legal education to get to the promised land. And for them, Cali could be the magic ring, the magic they need to get there. And I think that ought to be what the focus ought to shift to. Aim at the students. We're not going to convert hobbits into something else. But if the students are using Cali, if the students are excited by Cali, that may attract more and more. That may help us find the hobbits who are ready and willing to go on an adventure. But as a matter of fact, I did find one use, which I thought we could get any professor to willingly go for. And that was, as I was preparing for the conference, I had a frantic knock on the door of my office. Professor, as I recognized one of our recent graduates, Professor, I just realized I should have taken your advice and taken real estate finance. Essentially our Property 2 course, because we now only have one semester of property. I should have taken real estate finance. We're studying for the bar, and I realize now I need to know about mortgages and recording, and I don't. And so can I sit here and have you teach me about mortgages and recording? This is the moment when you want the sword that turns blue when the ogres come in the room. The moment it dawned on me. Out of my desk and here. The lessons which will introduce you to these materials are right on this disc. Fire up the Cali lessons, and you will get that introduction that you missed. Because we know they're great recording and mortgage lessons. And the more those, now, by the way, think about how that fits in with hobbits not being thrown out of their routine. Otherwise, I had the prospect of this or other recent graduates camping out on my office, waiting to get a 3-credit course in an afternoon. I do that, but I think that that's what we need to do. I think we need to shift that focus. The people who are really interested in that may draw along the others. It's now open to questions. If there were, go ahead. Or and maybe we ought to bring Ron and Joe back up. Yes. By the way, the version of The Hobbit that my son was in was a musical. And the high point of it was the dance of the trolls. Are you up for it? No, we're not going to do it. All right. I'll let Joe hit the final slides. Or
I just want Oh, I'm sorry.
They would demand this. Maybe out there fighting to get in. Acting in.
Close to time, but let's
Get more.
And
Nobody's made.
And-
That's what you're hearing too.
And the beauty of a well-written Cali lesson is it is a Socratic dialogue. And so, and time is up, and I do think we did have one further. The person who actually helped us put all this together is up in the upper left-hand corner.
Our lead dog.
Lead dog. That's our lead dog. So thank you very much. We kept you a little over time.